Hello, hello, and hello. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. Welcome back to our review session. So today what we're going to do is begin review of CDFM Module 2, Competency 2, Cost and Economic Analysis. We are recording this session, so please be sure to mute your phones, your mic, so that whatever your feedback is, it doesn't get recorded on the video, because this is the video that gets uploaded to YouTube. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to go over the Module 2, Competency 2, Cost and Economic Analysis. And what you'll see is this section is focused on the acquisition system. And so without me going into it, we're going to dive right into it. If you have not already subscribed to our YouTube page, please go ahead and do so. Again, it brings visibility. Okay, mute participant. I'm going to mute your phone because it was not muted. So what it does when you click like, you click share, you follow, you leave a comment, what that does, it lets YouTube know, hey, we need to advertise this channel even more. So that's the purpose of all of that. It doesn't cost you anything. All right. So let's begin on page 2.2.5. If you're on the phone line and you have a question, feel free to ask the question. If it's something I'm discussing at that time, don't forget again, your question is being recorded on this video. And so if you don't want it said, you can get with me after the recording and I'll discuss it with you. So page 2.2.5, which is, I wish they would have started every section with this diagram, because all the functions of the Department of Defense are done by utilizing these three systems. So let me recap just a little bit to bring us up to this point. So as we started off in 2.1, we talked about the National Security Council, which publishes the National Strategic Document, National Security Strategy. That's the strategic document in which I call the Big Op Order. And so the highest command publishes the National Security Strategy. That document is usually published the second year of a presidential term. Give them enough time to get into office, and then they publish the NSS. So once that Big Op Order, the NSS, is published, then all of the agencies, to include the Department of Defense, takes the NSS and determine what are the defense-related things that we're required to do to meet the National Security Strategy. So on page 5, the National Defense Strategy, in the middle, is what the Department of Defense determines are the things that we need to do. All of three of these systems will work together to meet the National Defense Strategy in the middle, and the NDS will then meet the National Security Strategy. That's how that all aligns. So after the Department of Defense comes up with the NDS, tells you what the military strategy is supposed to be, what Homeland Security and all of that supposed to be, is they have to determine, okay, what capabilities do we need to accomplish these tasks? The three systems are JCITS, Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System, PPBE, and the Defense Acquisition System. So after the National Defense Strategy is determined, the bottom left, I start with JCITS because in the Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System, what you see there is the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff is in charge of it. And they have representatives from the different joint staff sit on a council called the JROC, Joint Requirements Oversight Council. What they do now, they represent the warfighter. So they take the strategy, then they begin to do a bunch of analytical exercises to determine if there are any capability gaps. When they're doing the JSIDs, they're looking at the .MLPF, that's the acronym. My nose is itching. Doctrine, organization, training, material, leader development, personnel, and facilities. They're trying to figure out, where does the capability gap lie? Which area? So if it is anything other than material, it triggers the PPBE process. We just need more training. We need money for trainers. Leader development. We need more facilities, military construction dollars. We need to build some new facilities. If that is what's going to fix the problem. Once the JSIS process is complete, the Joint Requirements Oversight Council will then document their findings in an initial capabilities document. You got to let people know what's the end result of your analysis. So the end result of the JSIDs is the publishing of the ICD, Initial Capabilities Document. And I'll show it to you again when it shows up on the pages after that. It is not on the page directly in front of me, but I'm using the diagram to orient you, so when you get to the pages, you can always come back to the diagram. Once the JROC is complete and they do the initial capabilities document and they say, we have a capability gap in material. We need more equipment. Instead of saying equipment, they say material, EL. We need more vehicles, aircraft, systems. If it requires a material solution, that triggers the third system, the Defense Acquisition System. I'm still on the diagram. If you look on the diagram, it tells you who is in charge of that system. The JSIDs, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff with the Joint Requirement Oversight Council, that's the joint staff, has oversight of JSIDs. They're the one that do it. PPBE, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, has oversight of PPBE. Likewise, the Defense Acquisition System, the bottom right system, you have the USD, the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. That's the acquisition guy or gal is in charge of the Defense Acquisition System. This is the same diagram that you saw in 2.1. DoD has 3 support systems in order to accomplish its missions: JSIDs, PPBE, and the Defense Acquisition System. So let's move on to the top of page 6. So bottom of page 5 is talking about PPBE. Top of page 6 is talking about JSIDs. And remember, I gave you the acronym .MLPF. It is listed in that paragraph under JSIDs, like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line from the bottom of that paragraph. You'll see it listed: doctrine, organization, and so forth. So if you want to see it in writing, once the JSIDs is completed, the joint staff does the initial capabilities document, ICD. If it requires a material solution, it triggers the Defense Acquisition System. You have 2 regulations there under the Defense Acquisition System. What is it? It is the management system that's used, or the process used, to guide DoD acquisitions program. The DoD Directive, DODI 5000.01, talks about the Defense Acquisition System. Then the 5000.02 talks about the operation of that system or that framework. I'm bringing those regulations up because I often get feedback that people see it again. So make sure you know the two DoD regulations associated with the defense acquisition system. Also, the second paragraph under the dash tells you the reason for the defense acquisition system. It's to manage risk. What it also does is allows the decision makers the ability to, the flexibility to be able to make decisions as they move along in the process. So if you aspire to get past module 1, 2, 3 and go for module 4, you will see a lot of this information more in depth, but a lot of this information in 2.2, you'll see it again on module 4. So the information still continues. So there's 3 types of risk that is looked upon under the defense acquisition system. That is cost risk, schedule, and performance. Those are the risks that is evaluated throughout the whole process. You want to make sure when you get an estimate as you move along the acquisition system that that cost doesn't skyrocket, doesn't go above and beyond. That's cost risk. Schedule risk is the contractor says the job will be done in a month, and here you are month 2, month 3. That's a risk. You got to be able to identify up front to save money. Performance. What is the quality of the work that contractor has completed on that particular task? Cost, schedule, performance. I'm going to repeat that as I go through because you're going to see it multiple times in the study guide, and I'm sure you're going to see it again on the exam. So the purpose of the defense acquisition system is to manage cost, schedule, and performance risk. On page 227, it kind of shows you the relationship between JSIDs and how it carries over for a material solution to the acquisition system. So that diagram at the top left is the ICD, that initial capabilities document that I told you about. Is after the JSIDs is done, that Joint Requirements Oversight Council, who is chaired by the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, will publish that initial capabilities document. This is the problem we identified, the capability gap. This is the recommended solution. If the solution is a material solution, it triggers material solution analysis, technology. I'm not going to go into it on this diagram because page 8 and 9 goes into it extensive, and so I'm going to slow down in that area. At the DoD level, you're going to have major defense programs, major defense acquisition program, your MDAPs, and your MAIS, major automated information system. Those are the 2 types of acquisition systems you're going to deal with, or programs. Again, on top of page 8, that first paragraph repeats again what happens at the end of JSIDs. If you read it, you'll see it talks about the ICD again, initial capabilities document. And so it's just repetitive of everything I already went over to include the 5000.02. All right, the meat and potatoes of this portion is on page 8 and 9, because you're going to have to know the phases, the milestone of the acquisition system, and what's happening at each of those. So you have to think of it logically. On page 8 at the bottom, the first phase, so there are 5 phases: material solution analysis, technology, maturation and risk reduction, engineering and manufacturing, production and deployment, operations and support. So think of it as cradle to grave. When you develop the thing to when you get rid of it, dispose of it. So Now you have your ICD document in hand, your initial capabilities document with your recommended solutions. Now I need to come up with courses of action to satisfy that ICD. So the first step or the first phase of the acquisition process is material solution analysis. You need to know the purpose of each phase. So it says, the purpose of this phase is to conduct the analysis on the concept for the product that will be required. You'll have to identify, what does this product need to do? What are the key performance parameters? What are the key system attributes? What is it supposed to do? So you have a checklist when you're looking at the different analysis of the alternative, the different alternative. In order for me to know what courses of action to pick, I need to know what the criteria are. So think about it in that sense. I know what the document says I'm supposed to do. Now let me look at different courses of action. So material solution analysis phase looks at the ICD, develops the KPPs and the KSAs so that we can do the analysis of the alternative. Let's say I have 3 solutions that I think will fix the problem. Now I need to compare them to one another. Analysis of the alternatives. That's what it's talking about. That's done in phase 1. After each phase, you always have a decision point. Because again, if I said earlier, it allows the decision makers the flexibility to make changes in the program as they move along. So you don't just invest $1 million and $1 million go left and the solution doesn't fix the problem. So the decision point number 1 is milestone A. A favorable milestone A decision approves entry into the next phase. So you cannot go from material solution analysis automatically to technology maturation and risk reduction. You have to have an approval from the milestone decision authority. That's the person in charge of that process. So I'm reading on page 228. Decision approves entry into the next phase, which is technology maturation and risk reduction. It also releases, and the release of final request for proposal. When you have an initial request, I need to know who can make it, right? So I have to do a request for proposal so that I can send it out in the next phase and start getting contractors to come back and say, yes, I can build this equipment, and these are the things I can do. It also says the responsible component will demonstrate that the program will be fully funded within their FYDP, that's the same one talked about in 2.1, Future Year Defense Program, at milestone A. That means you got to have the money up front, and you got to show that you have the money up front. Favorable milestone A. Here's an important statement with acquisition. A favorable meaning the milestone decision authority says, okay, let's move on to technology development phase. But it says a favorable milestone A decision does not equate to program initiation. Just because I move on from milestone A to technology maturation doesn't mean I'm definitely going ahead through all the other phases. And I'll show you where you actually start an acquisition program. So milestone A is not the starting point. It does not equate to program initiation. Phase 2, technology maturation and risk reduction. It's telling you what they're doing there. We're developing the technology and we're reducing risk. So entry into this phase occurs after I get approval in milestone A. What is the purpose of technology maturation and risk reduction? It tells us The purpose of this phase is to reduce technology, engineering, integration, and life cycle cost risk, because you're looking from the time I create it, develop it, to getting rid of it, disposing of it. And so I have to look at the risk. Can I integrate this system into an existing system and build upon it? Do I have to start from scratch? Those are the questions being answered. Do I already have technology available to me? So reducing technology, engineering, integration, and life cycle cost risk to the point that a decision can be made. So we're also, during this phase, developing the request for proposal, release decision point, which is a critical decision point in the life cycle of an acquisition program. So the purpose of the development of the request for proposal release point is to ensure that the release of the engineer manufacturing development, that an executable program. So a lot of things have to be done before you get to that phase to make sure by the time you get to the phase, you can execute. That's phase 2. After every phase is a milestone. At the top of page 229, we move into milestone B. It says favorable milestone B decision approves program entry into the next phase, which is EMD. And for responsible component to award the EMD contract. Milestone B, here is the big statement. Milestone B is normally the formal initiation of an acquisition program. So if you're asked, in the acquisition process, when is an acquisition program initiated? It is initiated at milestone B. There's a few more information in this paragraph that happens at milestone B. Excuse me. With the milestone decision authority, that's what MDA stands for, of the acquisition program baseline. If once they pick a solution in material solution analysis, they approve it in milestone A. Then we look at the technology side of it to reduce the risk. Then we go to milestone B. Once it's approved, we're going into the program. I need a starting point. How much should things cost? Because again, you cannot just operate without an estimate. And so the acquisition program baseline is also presented and approved in milestone B. It makes sense because that's where a program initiation starts. So I need to know what is the estimated cost for this capability. So who does the baseline? Don't forget about your program managers. Every program within the Department of Defense has a program office, a program manager in charge of it. Those are the subject matter expert in those areas. So even though it doesn't state it right next to acquisition program baseline, know that your program manager approves or creates the baseline. The acquisition program baseline is the agreement between the milestone decision authority and the program manager. In case you want to see it in writing, it's in the middle of that first paragraph on 229. Another thing that's done at milestone B, so what I did when you're studying, write all of these things off to the side. Make a note. In milestone B, you have the acquisition program baseline that is done by the program manager. It's got to be approved by the milestone decision authority. You have also what's called the LRIP, low rate initial production. It is a quantity, a scope. So if we're building a different aircrafts, we need to know initially how much are we going to create. We got to build it. So we could put it in the field to see if it actually fills the capability gap. So the LRIP, low rate initial production, is the number or the quantity of the amount of that aircraft that we're going to initially develop. Then finally, in milestone B, it mentions, following the milestone B review, the milestone decision authority's decisions, whatever decision they make, is documented in an acquisition decision memorandum. So remember when we did the last session, at the end of each phase, you need to know what document is completed. So at the end of milestone B, the ADM, acquisition decision memorandum, is documented with that MDA decision. Milestone B, they say, now let's go ahead into a formal acquisition program. Then we hit the engineering and manufacturing development phase. That's phase 3. Entry into this phase occurs after we get approval in milestone B. What is the purpose of the EMD? The purpose of the EMD phase is to develop. Now we need to move to the phase where we're developing, building, testing the product to actually see if it's going to fill that capability gap that the JROC identified in the JCIDS process. So what do you do in EMD? Developmental testing is done here during this phase because I'm developing the item. I just built it. I'm developing it. I have to test it, but I'm not giving to the warfighter yet. I got to test it internally. So developmental test and evaluation. And I'm making that statement because there's different types of test and evaluation. So developmental tells you they just built it and they're doing their internal testing, what they call it, on the prototypes. So what are they looking at when they're building it? Don't forget those key performance parameters, those key system attributes that were established in the beginning. Remember they said, this is what this aircraft need to do. This is the parameters. So once they start building it in EMD, they're also making sure that it achieves the KPPs and the KSAs that were identified in material solution analysis. So once we complete EMD, the next milestone is milestone C. So at milestone C and the limited deployment, because we only build a few of them, so we want to look at what their results are. So milestone C and limited deployment decision. So you have milestone A, B, C, limited deployment decision. So that's 4 decision points already we talked about. So before we can move to production. Approval depends in part on specific criteria defined at milestone B and included in the milestone B acquisition decision memorandum. MDA decisions are also documented, so it's just repeating. So the only thing done at milestone C is now we're getting ready to produce that LRIP. Remember that quantity we established in the beginning in milestone B? Now we move to production and deployment. After we get approval in C to move on, then we move on to the 4th phase, which is production and deployment phase. What is the purpose? The purpose of this phase is to achieve an operational capability that satisfies and meets that capability gap. It solves the problem. So as I mentioned, in EMD, you're doing the developmental test. Now when you're in the production phase, you're actually going to introduce it to the warfighters. So you're doing operational tests and evaluation. because you want to check the effectiveness and the suitability of the system. It's different when you test it in-house versus when you actually put it out in the field for the warfighter to use. So under production, you'll see again the LRIP. Now we're actually producing. So let's say in milestone B, the quantity was 10. Now in production, we first start off by producing those 10 and only those 10 so that we can do the operational test and evaluation. During this production and deployment phase, the program also achieves initial operational capability. Again, I know this section is difficult. That's why I'm going slow. So the best advice I have is from the paragraph, all those things I'm identifying is for you to pull those information out and then think about the process from cradle. When I have a concept, on paper, I'm picking a solution. Now, on paper, I'm looking at the technology requirements. What are the risks? And then milestone B, I'm going into identifying how much I'm going to develop at first. I have a starting point, which is my baseline. Now I move to engineering and manufacturing because I'm starting the engineering development phase. I am actually starting to develop the concept to build the item. Now I'm producing that LRIP. So initial operational capability is the development of that prototype that we're going to put out into the field. After phase 4, so once they develop the LRIP, before they go and build 1 million of these aircraft, there must be another decision point. Because what's the purpose of doing the LRIP is we want to see how these 10 aircraft perform in the operational field. So after let's say we do it for 6 months. After that 6 months, I need the data. The Milestone Decision Authority now needs to make a decision. Do we continue and develop the rest of these aircraft, for example? So you have another decision point. So that's decision point number 5 at least. Full rate production decision or full deployment decision. And it tells you, although this decision point is technically reached during the production and deployment phase, it is not a milestone. It is an extremely important decision point. So they're telling you it is a part of production and deployment. At the very end, a decision is made, but it's important enough for them to pull it out of production and deployment so you can see it and identify it. So they're going to decide, now can we develop 1 million of these items, or however many they need. Phase 5 and the final phase is operations and support. So full rate is how much we're going to develop. The purpose of the operations and support is to execute the product support strategy, satisfy material readiness, and operational support performance requirements. This phase has 2 major efforts. And actually, let me see something. Yes, 2 major efforts. You have the sustainment and disposal part of it. The life cycle support plan is prepared by the program manager. For the acquisition, most of your answers is going to be the PM, the program manager, because they're the subject matter expert. So sustainment and disposal. How are we going to maintain, keep the item running, doing that life cycle support? And during this phase, I'm at the bottom of page 9, the program also achieved its fully operational capability, which occurs when the total quantity of operational systems or items is developed to the warfighter. So LRIP is done initially, then at the end of production and deployment, A decision point is made to determine, can we move ahead and develop the rest of the items, the full rate. So in operations and support, it ends when you develop all of the item, you have your life cycle support plan in place, and you all part of that plan is how do you dispose of the item when that life cycle, if it's a 5-year life cycle, at the end of that 5th year, how do you dispose of the item? So those are the phases, milestones, and decision points for the acquisition process. And for the individual that's on the phone, if you have any question, please unmute yourself and ask your question at any time if I happen to say something you don't understand. All right, on page 210, it goes into the relationship between acquisition phases and funding, because you got to have money as you're moving along in the acquisition. So the chart kind of lays it out for you. Remember the order of the phases. Material solution analysis, you're using primarily RDT&E, research, development, technology, and equipment, or in some instances, you can use O&M. Technology maturation, phase 2, and risk reduction, you're using all RDT&E. So depending on the phase, we'll say what type of money you're using, what type of appropriation. EMD phase, RDT&E and procurement. Production and deployment uses procurement and military construction. Operations and support using O&M and MILPERS. You're gonna need to know that. That's a good matching question right there if I'm a test writer. What else? Relationship between acquisition phase. So they're just repeating that. Page 11. We already talked about milestone A, B, C. They're repeating that. Page 12 goes and talks a little bit about the 5000.01. That's the regulation, the policy. The DOTI 5000.01, DOD instruction, gives flexibility. The system or the item in that acquisition program must have flexibility, responsiveness, innovation, discipline, streamline. The other regulation on 13 on the operation of that acquisition framework is the DODI 5000.02. What you need to take away from here, that first paragraph talks about the instruction identifies the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. So there's another title for that USD ANS, is the Defense Acquisition Executive. That's what they're telling you. All they're telling you is like I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a sister. I'm the same person, but I have different titles. So the USD ANS is the Defense Acquisition Executive. They are also called the MDA, Milestone Decision Authority, for those acquisition programs that's at the DOD level. They're MDAs. And you'll also learn, if not this week, actually in the next couple slides, let me see. Yeah, I might get to it in the next couple slides, is the USD ANS is the Defense Acquisition Executive, Milestone Decision Authority for acquisition programs at the DOD level, and the USD ANS is the chairman of the Defense Acquisition Board. Just like the vice chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff has the JROC, and he sits on the acquisition side as co-chairman of the Defense Acquisition Board. The other chairman is the USD ANS. Your success on the Module 2 exam is being able to take that puzzle and realize the significance of these key individuals sitting on different boards to tie all of those planning into the national defense strategy. On page 13, let's see. The first paragraph also states, if it's at the DOD level, the Milestone Decision Authority, which is also listed there, is the Defense Acquisition Executive, is the USD ANS. At the component level, they also have acquisition representative. They're called component acquisition executive. Those titles will come into play in a little bit, in the next couple of pages. But I want to take you to paragraph number 3. The DoD component head will implement the DoD 5000.01, okay? But in highlight, you'll see they reference their service acquisition executive for the military department. 2 components. You always look for things that are different. 2 components, the U.S. Special Operations Command and the Defense Logistics Agency, DLA, they have their own acquisition process, their own acquisition responsibilities. So they are an exception to the policy. All the other services, if it's not at their level, they got to go to the USD ANS, or the exception to policies. 2 components, SOCOM and DLA, have been given their own acquisition management responsibilities. Okay, that's all I have for that page. All right, take a deep breath. Now we're going to go into the different acquisition categories. When I started off, I talked about major defense acquisition programs. That's your aircraft, your vehicles, your whatever else equipment they can build, versus the automated system, the MAIS, Major Automated Information Systems. So let's go on page 2214. If a program is, let's start off this way. If a program is ACAT 1, that's acquisition level 1, it tells you it is a major program. It's a major defense major defense acquisition program. I'm looking at the chart on the left on page 14. It also tells you estimated by the USD Acquisition and Sustainment, that's the senior acquisition person, to require total expenditures. They have the dollar amounts there. I do not go into them, but you should read them, because what I want to get to is the slide on the right. If the program is an ACAT 1 Delta, so ACAT 1 tells you is an MDAP program, major defense program. If it's an ACAT 1 Delta, the D behind it tells you it's a defense level program, if it's been categorized as 1 Delta. If it's anything else, like a 1C, then it tells you it's a component level acquisition program. And then the CAE is the one in charge of it. I repeat, ACAT 1 tells you it's a major defense program. ACAT 1D, the D behind it tells you it's at defense level. That means they're the decision makers. And the Milestone Decision Authority, which is the USD ANS, is also called the Defense Acquisition Executive, the DAE. ACAT 1 Charlie, the C behind it tells you it's a component level. That means they've been given the ability to make decisions on these particular programs. The Component Acquisition Executive is the Milestone Decision Authority. They make decisions on those programs. That's ACAT 1. So it's also explained on the bottom of page 14 and the top of page 15 for you to go back and read on your own leisure. 2215 tells you a little bit about Component Acquisition Executive. And look, it also repeated again that SOCOM and DLA have their own acquisition responsibilities. They do their own thing. So they don't go to the Component Acquisition Executive, they do their own. The second set of programs is the MAIS, Major Automated Information Systems. The slide on the page 15 to the left The automated programs are ACAT 1 Alpha. The A behind it lets you know they're talking about automation. Defense Travel System. That's a system. So it's a major automated information system. So ACAT 1A tells you it's a major system. And then on the right of that page 15, now it's a little different because it says ACAT 1A, lets you know it's automated, but the M for major automated information system, lets you know it's a DoD level. They could have made it easy and put 1AD, but they didn't, so I'm sorry. It's 1AM. The M is for maize, and it tells you it's a defense level. At that stage, it says the MDA is either the Defense Acquisition Executive or the USDA&S, or he or she can delegate. Normally, the DoD information officer is in charge of your automated, and it makes sense. Likewise, the ACAT 10C, the C means it's at a component level. That's the level you need to know. I don't preach memorizing the dollar thresholds because those things fluctuate and change all the time. So at least know the right chart of each one of these. That's explained on the bottom of page 15 and 16. So ACAT 1, MDAP programs, ACAT 1A, automated, major automated information system. ACAT 1AD, ACAT 1D is DoD level major program. ACAT 1C is component level major program. ACAT 1A is the major automated program. ACAT 1AM is a DoD level automated program. And ACAT 1AC is a component level automated program. All right, I got it. Feels like I'm talking a different language. All right, some of the concept on page 16, we already talked about. A lot of it is repetitive, so don't overwhelm yourself. We already talked about the defense business system, how they operate, the acquisition program baseline in the beginning, when you have to determine your starting point in milestone B. We talked about the baseline being done by the program manager, and it's approved by the milestone decision authority. Analysis of the alternative, we talked about this when we talk about material solution analysis. When the JSIS was completed, the JROC completed the initial capabilities document to document their findings and their recommended solution. That document is then used to come up with different courses of action. And then we do analysis of the alternative, your war gaming, your testing those category or those alternatives to see if they meet those performance parameters that were established in the beginning. On page 17, primary responsibility for the analysis of the alternative. So this fits into that material solution analysis phase, if you want to look at it that way. Preparation and approval of the AOA, because we talked about the DCAPE last week, Director of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation. They're telling you here that the DCAPE is responsible for doing the guidance on the analysis of the alternative. Anything to do with cost benefit analysis, cost analysis, the DCAPE is the name to pick. So AOA for Acquisition 1 and 1A programs is prepared and approved for AOA guidance, and we get AOA guidance from the DCAPE. This is the same DCAPE that's in charge of the Future Year Defense Program. Same guy that's in charge of the programming phase of the PPBE process. So don't lose sight of it. And then at the bottom of page 17, total systems approach from cradle to grave. That's, they have to look at how the whole system, how much it costs, schedule, performance throughout that whole process. So you're looking at the total systems approach. Now, I think, let me see. I don't know. I don't think I want to continue because this is going into a different area, the life cycle cost and how they determine how much a program is going to cost, how that baseline is started, and then how they determine when to ask for the appropriation. Because remember, we only get budget annually, so they have to time it out to when they need the funding from Congress to ask for those funding. So I'm going to stop on page 17, 217 today, and then next week we'll pick up with the life cycle cost. Let's see, did I account for this? Yes. So I have it on the schedule for the 15th and the 22nd because it's a lot of information, so I know to break it up. All right, for those that are on, do you have any particular question on anything that I've discussed this morning? Please review the information. You're not going to get it just from listening to me. I've already established that. So make sure that you go over the information on your own a number of times so that you can clearly articulate what is going on. There's a lot of moving pieces, but the information ties to what you've already learned in the previous modules and even what we did in the last session. All right, I don't hear any questions. So again, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page as the option will come up at the end of the video. Please click like, click share, leave a comment. Great job. I have a question. Ask your question, whatever it is. I need more engagement on these videos so that YouTube will promote them. So this is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. Today we covered CDFM Module 2, Competency 2. So this will be Part 1, Cost and Economic Analysis. It focuses more on the acquisition process. That's the third DoD support system. So be sure to subscribe and let me know if you have any questions. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. I'll see you guys again next time.